Hello everyone, welcome back to Mortem Files. Today we're diving deep into another chilling case study, so stay with me as we uncover the truth. Let's start with today's case. The beginning years of a child are very important. As you grow up, so does your personality. How much love did you get in your childhood? Or not? How much attention did you get in your childhood? Or not? All these factors determine what you will do in the future. And can these factors turn an 11-year-old girl into a murderer who just manipulates anyone around him to get his work done? The story in this case really shocked me, and I think because of this case, I will see children from a different point of view forever. So let's learn a little more about today's case revolving around Mary Bell. Mary Flora Bell was born on 26th of May, 1957 in Northumberland, England. Betty's mother was Elizabeth Bell, whose nickname was Betty. Betty worked as a prostitute, and because of her frequent traveling, she couldn't stay at home much. She often left her daughter Mary at home with someone else for several days. The situation was so bad that once Betty even left Mary alone in her own house with a stranger. Before Mary, Betty had another son, and she treated him the same way. It is said that when Betty gave birth to Mary, as soon as Mary came out of the womb, Betty told the doctor, "Take this thing away from me." She was very young at that time, only 17 years old. But hearing such words from any mother feels extremely strange. This behavior of Betty continued in the future as well. She always neglected her children. While traveling, Betty met a man who was a criminal, a robber, and an alcoholic, whose name was William Billy Bell. Just a year after Mary was born, Betty married Billy. So that was her taste in men. I've read in many places that people who are broken tend to seek out other broken people, so they can help them and they can fix them. I'm not saying this thinking that Mary's mom, Betty, was a broken person, but her behavior and her choice of partner do raise a question. Anyway, Mary was an unwanted and neglected child. In her childhood, whenever Mary was with her mom, she would get hurt, or while playing, she would fall down. And yet, Betty would neither care for Mary nor give her any treatment. Because of this, Mary's aunt, Isa, felt that maybe Betty was doing all this deliberately so that Mary would get seriously injured, or perhaps even die while playing. Isa also shared that when Mary was only 3 years old, in 1960, Betty, in a fit of anger, pushed Mary out of a first-floor window. Mary miraculously survived, but she was badly hurt, including injuries to her head. Once, when Mary was very young, Betty gave her sleeping pills, hoping that she would never wake up again. It is also said that Betty once tried to sell Mary to a mentally unstable woman. This was a random woman who could not have children, and at that time, Betty was in need of money. She had absolutely no concern for her daughter. Betty actually sold Mary to this woman, and after leaving her at the train station, she went back home. When the elder sister, Catherine, found out that Betty had sold her own daughter, she traveled to the home of the mentally unstable woman, explained everything to her, and then brought Mary back to White House Road. It is also said that when Mary was just 5 years old, Betty began allowing some of her clients to sexually abuse her for some money, which is just cruel. All this was done to a little girl by her own mother. I cannot imagine how this must have affected her mental health at that time. But the signs of Mary's unstable mental state soon became visible, both at home and in school. Mary's behavior was very unpredictable. She had sudden urges, frequent mood swings, and even up until the age of 9, she continued wetting her bed. Some people might say it was just her wetting the bed, but that wasn't the case here. At such a late age, if a child is still wetting the bed, it can be a sign of emotional instability. At school, Mary would often get into fights with other children, and even at a very young age, she had tried to strangle other kids, either in class or while playing. Because of this behavior, the children were scared to go near Mary, and at school, she was left all alone. At home, she was all alone, but Mary had only one friend, whose name was Norma Joyce Bell. Norma lived in Mary's neighborhood, and she was the only one who talked to Mary. Both of them shared the same surname, Bell, but they were not related. They were just neighbors. When Norma first met Mary, she may or may not have known about Mary's temper, but according to statements, they both were very good friends. As Mary grew older, her mood swings and actions became increasingly extreme. This instability continued to escalate and eventually took a dark turn. On 11th May, 1968, a 3-year-old boy was found dazed, covered in blood, and stumbling near Margaret Road. A man who saw him immediately rushed the child to the hospital. When the boy recovered, he told the police that on that day he had been playing on the roof of a building with Mary Bell and Norma Bell. Suddenly, Mary became angry and pushed him from a height of about 7 feet, which caused his injuries. He also said that before pushing him, allegedly, Mary and Norma had tried to strangle him while playing in the sand. That same evening, when the police questioned both Norma and Mary about whether they knew this boy, they denied it. And they also denied ever going into that house. Mary chimed in, saying that they had only found the boy in that condition and had merely pointed him in the direction of the road. When the police asked them about the strangling, Mary denied that as well. But according to the boy, at that time, Mary had asked him, "What happens if you choke someone? Do they die?" After that, Mary placed both of her hands around his neck and began slowly squeezing. His skin started turning from normal to purple. Norma shouted at Mary to stop, but she didn't. When another girl rushed over to save the boy, Mary did the same thing to her. And then yet another girl named Susan came, and Mary attacked her in the same way. The police informed the local authorities about Mary's extreme behavior, and this news also spread in her school. The accusation against Mary and Norma was indeed very serious, but since both of them were still very young at the time, the police couldn't really take much action. They simply gave the girls a warning and told them to leave. But this was the first time that Mary's nature and actions became publicly visible. If the police had taken proper action at that time, perhaps many lives could have been saved in the future. On 25th May 1968, on 85th Street, Margaret Road, there lived a mischievous yet lovable 4-year-old boy named Martin Brown. The area where Martin lived had many abandoned buildings, mostly Victorian-era houses. Since the construction work there had stopped, many children would go into these broken-down houses to play. Parents didn't really object much. They would just tell their kids to stay close to home. And as long as the children were playing with other kids, parents usually let them be. One day, around 3:30 p.m., 3 children went into one of those abandoned houses to play. There, they found Martin lying on his back. His arms were stretched above his head, and foam mixed with a little blood was coming out of his mouth. There was no other blood around him, nor were there any other signs of violence on Martin's body. Shocked by the sight, the 3 children ran out of the house and told the locals what had happened. The locals called an ambulance, and very soon an ambulance arrived at the scene. As soon as they reached there, the nurses examined Martin and declared him dead. But the nurses who came there noticed something. Near Martin's body, there was a bottle of aspirin. So the nurses thought that maybe Martin had died after consuming it. However, when the report later came out, it was revealed that there was no trace of medicine in his body, and Martin had died of natural causes. While the nurses were giving Martin CPR, 2 more girls entered the building, 10-year-old Mary Bell and 13-year-old Norma Bell. The nurses assumed they were just children who had come there to play, so they shooed them away. After that, the 2 went to Martin's aunt's house. They knocked on the door, and when Martin's aunt came out, Mary said to her, "One of your sister's bairns has just had an accident. We think it's Martin, but we can't tell because there's blood all over him." Not at that time, but later Mary herself admitted that yes, she was the one who had killed Martin. However, the very next day, the police deduced that since it was a construction site, Martin's death might have been caused either by a head injury from the building or by some other natural cause. The very next day, on 26 May 1968, it was Mary's birthday. her 11th birthday. On that day, Mary and Norma broke into a nursery near Woodland Crescent. Once inside, they began vandalizing the place, tearing books, pulling out toys, throwing ink on the blackboard, overturning tables, and causing all sorts of destruction. After creating so much mess, both of them ran away. When the staff discovered this act of vandalism, they immediately called the police, and they arrived. And during this act of vandalism, the police found 4 notes. One of them said, "I murder so that I may come back." The second note read, "We did murder Martin Brown. Back off, you bastard." The third note simply said, "Back off, we murder. Watch out, Fanny and Efsler." And the final note was the most complex. "You are mice. Why? Because we murdered Martin Co. Brown. You bet. Look out, there are murderers about. By Fanny and Old Efsler. You screws." These 4 notes suggested that someone was killing children purely for enjoyment, just for fun. Despite everything that had happened, the police dismissed the incident, saying it was just a prank by children, just their mischief, just a prank, bro. 2 days later, on the 29th of May, when Martin Brown's body was being placed into the coffin, both Mary and Norma went to Martin's house. They called out to Martin's mom and said that they wanted to see Martin. June, who was Martin's mother, told both of them, "You still cannot see Martin, child." She thought that these kids wouldn't really know what had actually happened to Martin. But upon hearing this, Mary said to June, "Oh, I know he's dead. I just want to see him in his coffin." If that didn't give you chills, let me remind you, Mary Bell was just an 11-year-old girl. And she didn't stop there. She was soon about to target another innocent child. On 31st July 1968, Brian Howe, who at that time was only 3 years old, was playing outside his house with his brother and sister. When Mary and Norma saw them, they joined in. While playing, Brian took his dog and went along with Mary and Norma to play. His parents didn't object, since the kids were just going out to play, as I mentioned before. But when evening came and Brian still hadn't returned, his family grew worried. That night, Brian's entire family, along with a search party, went out to look for him. After a short while, Brian's body was discovered in a playground near his house, lying between 2 large concrete blocks, partially covered with some grass. When the police arrived, they noticed that after killing Brian, the murderer had tried to hide his body. Because his body was covered with grass and weeds, but it was such a poor job that even the police were surprised. Brian's body had small bruises, there were scratches on his neck, and a broken pair of scissors was found nearby. Brian's hair had been cut in a very strange way, and near his genitals there was an M-shaped mark, which had been cut with the scissors. It seemed as if someone had been bullying Brian. Looking at these bruises and scratches, the police determined that Brian had also been strangled to death. Whoever Brian's killer was, they held Brian's nostrils shut with one hand and strangled him with the other. The police deduced one more thing. The killer was most likely a child, because an adult's force would have been much stronger, and an adult's handprints are also larger in size. On Brian's clothes and shoes, a gray and maroon fiber was found, which did not belong to anyone's clothing in Brian's house. So, the police kept those fibers as evidence. After Brian Howe's body was found, a massive manhunt began. More than 100 investigators started carrying out investigations around Northumberland. They questioned around 1,200 children, including Mary and Norma. All the children said that these 2 girls had been playing with Brian in the park that day. According to the police, during the investigation, Norma did most of the talking, while Mary sat quietly in the back, just listening and observing everything. And remember, Mary was only 11 years old, yet somehow she had the presence of mind to behave that way during the investigation. Both Norma and Mary at first denied knowing Brian. However, inconsistencies in their individual accounts soon became apparent. When questioned further, the girls admitted that they did in fact know Brian and had been playing with him on the day in question. Mary then stated that she remembered seeing an 8-year-old local boy with Brian on the afternoon of July 31st. She claimed she had seen this boy hitting Brian. She also recalled that Brian appeared to have been covered in grass and weeds, as if he had been rolling in a field, and that the boy had been in possession of a small pair of scissors. After that, Mary made a mistake, and in trying to make her story more believable, she said, "I saw him trying to cut a cat's tail off with scissors, but there was something wrong with him. One of the cat's legs was broken or bent." From this statement alone, Officer James Dobson deduced that it was Mary, not someone else, who had killed Brian, and that she was the real culprit. By then, the police had identified both Mary and Norma as being involved. By caught, it didn't mean they were put in jail yet, but the police were certain the two girls were responsible for the children's deaths. 2 days after this discovery, a call came into the police station from Norma's parents. They told the police that Norma had already known about Brian's death beforehand and that she had wanted to share this information. So, James Dobson went to Norma's house. When he went to her house, he scolded her, gave her a warning, and then asked her to tell him everything she knew, truthfully. Norma then said that on that day, Mary had been playing with someone, and afterward, Mary told her, "Let's go to Tin Lizzie's spot." It is still unclear what exactly Tin Lizzie's meant, but I think it is the name of that place. When Norma arrived at the spot, she saw that Brian was already dead. After that, Mary climbed onto Brian's body and demonstrated to Norma how she had strangled and killed him. Mary then told Norma that after killing Brian, she felt a sense of relief and even a kind of joy. She also admitted that she had cut the letter M on his genitals with a razor. Officer Dobson was shocked, obviously, because no one expects such things from a child. But when Dobson went back and told Mary everything, she at first denied it. Then she told Dobson that "You are trying to brainwash me, and I'll get a lawyer to get me out of this." Even as 11-year-old kid, Mary already had some awareness of lawyers and the concept of legal proceedings, and she realized that she was now trapped and no one would be able to help her. She knew that neither her mother nor her stepfather could get her out of this situation. In that moment, Mary didn't even know where her parents were. So that evening, when Mary didn't see any other option, she admitted everything to Dobson. That yes, she killed Brian. Now the fabric found near Brian's body. The forensic report also revealed that this fabric belonged to Mary and Norma's clothes. And all of this meant that they finally caught the killer. Brian Howie's body was being buried in the cemetery on 7th August 1968. And that evening, Dobson was going to arrest Mary. The news of Brian's death had spread so much that about 200 people had come to the cemetery. But when Dobson reached the cemetery, he saw that Mary was standing at the gate of the cemetery, and she was clenching her hands and laughing at Brian's coffin. Officer Dobson then said to himself, "My God, I've got to bring her in, or else she'll do another one." Both girls were charged in connection with Brian's death. In response, Mary simply said, "That's all right by me." Norma, on the other hand, began crying and quietly said to herself, I'll pay you back for this." From this, it is evident that Norma was submissive in nature, and because of this, she would follow whatever Mary told her to do. Norma had also never stood up to Mary for a long time. However, according to the reports, Norma did not commit any of the killings, nor did she physically harm the children. All of the murders were committed by Mary. You may recall that at the beginning, I told you Mary's childhood story. The reason for that was to show how Mary's nature and personality had developed. Firstly, it was shaped by the abuse she suffered, and secondly, by the neglect of her mother. No child is inherently so cruel that they would deliberately harm another child. But Mary's environment hardened her from within, and at a very young age, she took a wrong path, which turned her into the kind of person who could commit such acts. Mary Bell was sentenced for the deaths of both boys, but Norma Bell was cleared of all charges after Mary herself stated that Norma had not done anything in the case. When Norma heard this in front of the jury, she clapped her hands in excitement and joy, while behind her, Mary cried loudly. Mary's mother and grandmother were also present in the court at that time. With this, the case came to an end. Before I go, I just want to say, if you enjoy true crime stories, make sure to subscribe. But with that, stay safe, stay kind, and keep your eyes open and your secrets closer. I'll be back soon. Goodbye.